the famous American. Let's talk about Frozen 2, which, man, I love Frozen 2. Far superior to Frozen 1. Now, one of the obvious themes and really plot lines in Frozen 2, and it's so much more mature for a Disney movie, especially the sequel to Frozen, just an easily likable movie. Frozen 2, ultimately, the theme of this is the aftermath, generations later, of colonization. Because ultimately, Arendelle, in Frozen, it's vaguely pointing to like Sweden, Norway, that part of the world. And the plot of Frozen 2 has to deal with learning that actually their country, their nation, whatever, was involved ultimately in pushing out the natives, which we could see this even as an allegory of even the United States. We could easily see that, and that's how it resonates to, I think, an American viewer if they process it that way. And in the likeness too of Thor Ragnarok, we learn in Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor movie, which is also Disney property, we learn that what we thought was a good kingdom doing great things to protect people, they actually were very much so involved in basically colonizing the world and having slaves and building their empire off of conquering others. And ultimately that's the theme of Frozen 2. Being woke, realizing that, coming to terms with that, and thinking, modern day me, generations later, even though I had nothing to do with it, now I do know what can I do with that. So I think that's very interesting, and I love the fact that Disney took a risk with this plot line. And even if the reviews are more mixed in Frozen 2 than they were the first one, but I think that's okay. I think we can be okay with being challenged, with having this concept of realizing this. It's not to say, oh, it's my fault because I was born in this country and that's our country's history and they did some bad things. It's a matter of saying, in theory, it has nothing to do with me. It was way before me. But step one is recognizing that it happened. And what can we do, if nothing else, to prevent it from happening again? So those are my thoughts. Frozen 2, obvious theme and even plot line is colonization, or the aftermath of it. Some people say, well, who was the villain in this one? Obviously Hans was the villain in Frozen 1. I would say no, he was not. He did not start the plot. The parents started the plot when they refused to communicate and let their daughters communicate and lock their daughters up. They were the actual villains in Frozen 1. Hans was just a red herring of sorts. But in this one, people are saying, well, the villain is also an honest grandfather. He was ultimately the one that started the whole plot, that put that in place. And I think we could say by default he's kind of like the Hans of the first one. He's not the real villain. If anybody's the villain, it's a matter of not taking responsibility to recognize what happened so that we can prevent that. That's how I perceive Frozen 2 and this whole colonization aftermath theme. What are your thoughts? Right here.